Welcome back to Holy Pastor Doing Stuff, your one-stop shop to learn how to do life the holy way. This time, how to be a good student and survive school. Now, as you can probably guess, God predestined me to be holy, so there's nothing I have had to do to change my salvation status. Likewise, I got a 4.0 GPA without even having to study because God predestined it to be so. But not everyone is predestined to greatness, so I figured I'd invite Jason here to help us out and to help everyone who's not guaranteed a 4.0 to learn how to be a good and holy student. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thanks for having me. It's great being here, for sure.
And you have earned 77 holiness points just for being here, in case you were keeping track.
Solid.
And I understand that you are soon going to start studying for a master's degree. Why do you want to torture yourself with more school?
Yeah, and I've been asking myself that every day since I signed up for the program, for sure. And so, you know, when I really started thinking about the answer to this question, I've kind of brainstormed, thought out the whole answer, and you know, what I really kind of deduced or kind of decided from this question is that, you know, we're all given, you know, a set of unique challenges and obstacles to go throughout life, and especially in college. You know, college is a whole new environment for everybody, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, and especially, you know, in the last couple of years, you know, being several hundred miles away from home, and especially in kind of the last year and a half, you know, once COVID really became, you know, up and running and really well known. And so last spring, you know, they offered, you know, the free master's program, and I kind of looked at my parents. I'm like, you know, if it's free, you know, then it's for me. You know, it's kind of really not much of a choice that I have here. And so, you know, I've really asked myself that question, like, hey, we're given a certain amount of challenges throughout life, now how are we going to overcome them? And you know, and I've always been told, like, hey, you know, employers really want to see how you've been given that kind of upper hand, how you've really kind of overcome everything. And it's kind of on the flip side too, you know, God, you know, brings us through a set of challenges so he can go through a set of challenges, then that he can really learn more about ourselves that we really never knew before.
Well, here's a holy pastor in training. He brought up God without even my having to ask. 3 more holiness points for you.
Right, getting up towards a B now.
So, since you talked about God, let me do some of that, because I am the holy pastor. I always thought of school kind of like the book of Numbers in the Bible. You deal with it, but only to get to the good parts of the Bible. But you must like school if you're going to go do another year.
Right, and so there was definitely a time where I definitely kind of felt different about it. But especially once I got to college, and once I really started getting into it, once I really started seeing all the programs that they had to offer and this, that, and the other thing, you know, I started to realize, like, hey, you know, every day is just so unique and different, where I was like, okay, this is really a great way for me to stay engaged with it. And like I said, you know, we have to get through certain parts of it in order to get to the great parts and the fun parts of it. You know, and definitely through those, you know, parts where you don't really want to go through, you know, I've always kind of taught myself, you know, or I made myself memorize the poem Footprints in the Sand, and how during those parts that we don't want to go through, or the parts where, you know, that are more so tough rather than easy, you know, it's always a question of, like, hey, why do I have to go through this? Why do I have to go through it on my own? And I love the part where, you know, the poem where God told the person, like, hey, look, you know, I know you've only seen one footprint, but they were mine, because I was walking through them with you. And so that's what I kind of really loved, and that's, you know, kind of taught this question number 1 too. But yeah, it's just the fact that, hey, every day and every semester and every year is just so unique and different, and it helps my mind say, like, hey, you know, it's actually a lot more fun than you think. So just stay engaged with it in the long run. It'll work magic for sure.
Well, excellent. You know, anyone who plans on coming on to the show to share your expertise, you're really going to have to step up your game. Jason has brought his holiness game today, so watch out for when I invite you onto the show. Anyway, as I said earlier, I never had to study.
Of course.
Because God favors me with righteous intelligence.
Right.
But what advice do you have? Thank you for just accepting that to be true. What advice do you have for those students out there who find school challenging?
Yeah, so there's definitely been a very large handful of moments, especially in my early age, especially in high school. You know, once we got to St. John's, you know, they really loved like having me stay up until midnight, 1 o'clock, making me get up at 5 in the morning just to do it over and over and over again. And then there was a little kind of some fewer moments like that in college, but college still loved to give me a good challenge. And so even though the challenges were tough, even though they were unique in their own way, I loved taking them on. I'm like, okay, yes, please, I love it. And so what I really had to remind myself and what I want to tell the people is to trust that process. Because there's a lot of times where I questioned it. I questioned the process, I questioned the journey, I questioned myself. I asked myself, why are you going through this process when it's not rewarding me right now? And I really noticed it for the first time at St. John's when a lot of neat moments kind of came up in my faith journey, where it kind of gave me the answers. You know, the answers kind of, it was kind of like walking to a wall, or like kind of slapped me across the face like, hey, here's the answer for you. And once I realized that, I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And so I always kind of remind myself of the song where the lyrics go, you know, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. And you know, whenever I go through like this journey or those processes, you know, I've reminded myself of those lyrics, and those lyrics have really kind of saved me in a lot of those situations, because they made me like sit down and go through like a certain scenario instead of going to like a basketball game or a football game or off to the theater to watch a show or a musical, whatever. You know, I instead hit the books. I instead did like community service or whatever, and those moments have paid off tremendously, rather than, you know, going to watch a game. And so that's what I always tell people, is trusting that process, because, you know, it's one of those things where you'll be able to see, you know, what has in store for you. And it's always, you know, make sure you go ask for help, make sure you go get guidance, make sure you go get support, whether it's from a tutor or a professor or a mentor or a fellow student, or from the Bible or the church or somebody, you know, in your faith community that you want to talk to. You know, whatever works for each and every person, make sure you go like talk to somebody, find out, and always, you know, find out the questions that you have.
You know, I once was leading a Bible study, and I slapped someone across the face and I said, trust and obey, but they did not accept that as God's word, so I don't know I don't know what was wrong with that person. But so anyway, you're attending High Point University.
Right.
Is it because college is the high point of one's life?
Well, there's been a lot of times where I've really thought that there's been no point in college. Like, it's that's a whole other story. But it's one of those things where you really have to see the value of school and see, you know, okay, how can the school benefit me in unique ways that I would have never thought possible before. And so that's what I really thought of High Point. And you know, it's kind of funny how I got to High Point University, because right before school started one morning, and a buddy and I were sitting down having a cup of coffee and a donut. I've had too many donuts there, but it's okay. And my friend was like, hey, you know, I know you want to kind of get away from home, go somewhere different for college, just more specifically in a state that you've never really been to before. So have you heard of High Point University? I'm like, who's that? You know, because High Point, you know, it's a small little private college, you know, a small little area, kind of its own unique place right by the mountains in North Carolina. And so I looked at it, you know, I researched it online, I toured it, And just looking at the academic side of things, looking at the clubs and the sports and all the other extracurricular activities that I saw, and then the faith-based program on campus was really strong too. So one of the things that I really loved about it was that High Point University was founded as a Methodist church, and it still has its strong Methodist roots on the campus, and you can definitely tell with the environment that surrounds the whole university. And it shows really like all those factors, and specifically the faith factor in it, that really kind of sold me into coming. And so, because I always knew like, hey, there's a lot of times when students get to college and they can't really manage their time wisely because they see so many of the things that they want to do, and they kind of leave the faith behind and kind of just shove it in the back burner, like, oh, I'll come back to it later. But I love how High Point really makes it one of the focal points of the college. So, it's really cool to see. And so, it's all about finding that gut voice. Finding that voice deep down, saying, "Hey, this is the place for you, and this is where you can really see yourself growing and really becoming like a whole new person and being able to grow in that whole new life."
So in everything you're saying, it sounds like coming to know God and relying on God is the most important thing while you're at school.
Yeah, it's it's important to have, like I said, it's important to have that life balance between doing your classes, going to your classes, doing your homework, doing your extracurricular activities. If you play a sport, doing your sport. And then being able to kind of take yourself out of it, whether it's through like being able to meditate, reflect. I love doing like reflection at the end of the day, saying, hey, how did today go? Was it, did it go to your expectations? Did it go to God's expectations? And then also being able to do a lot more faith time, whether it's like Bible study with a couple buddies, or like going to church on Sunday. And I know that's what I love about North Carolina, is that they have like a lot of faith-based groups on campus and a ton of them off campus. And so they have like several programs throughout the weeks that you can go to, meet up with groups, and just like talk with each other, meditate together, sing with each other. And that's what really kind of helps. I think me personally helps keep me going. It's like, hey, I know these programs are there, so it's nice being able to have that 50-50 balance rather than like an 80-20 balance, or kind of 100 balance, like 100-0 balance between all school and nothing else.
You hear that, Massachusetts? You need to get your act together. Have more faith-based churchy stuff during the week. Be more like North Carolina.
Oh yes.
But all that life balance with God and work and things and school leads me to another question, which is, how do we balance out our teachers when they say wrong stuff? What do we do then? Because we obviously know that the earth is only 6,000 years old. Right. The Bible tells us so. So all that dinosaur stuff that people talk about is clearly just a liberal agenda to brainwash people. So what do we do then? Do we throw tomatoes at them?
Right, so that's definitely plan A. Always option one is throw tomatoes, because we all know how they always say that we have ketchup work to do. Okay, and we all know that's kind of a saucy situation to be in. And so after you've thrown all of your tomatoes from your refrigerator, always ask questions too, because obviously, as Albert Einstein says, never stop asking questions, because once we do, that's when all the conversations are going to go away. And I always feel like, conversations are a great way. Questions are a great way to bring up conversations. And if we don't talk about things, if we don't question things, then nothing's ever going to happen. And so I know all the times in class, whether it's at the beginning, people, like professors tell me, hey, you have any questions before we get started? And more likely than not, nobody's going to ask a question. And then roughly halfway through the class, the professor asks again, hey, do you guys have any questions? And then maybe one or two people have a question, but not a lot. And then at the end of the class, everybody's just so excited to get the heck out of the classroom and on to whatever they're going to do the rest of the day, that nobody's going to have a question. So more likely than not, the professor might not ask if anybody has any questions, because they can tell, like, hey, everybody's packing up, everybody's getting ready to get out of here and do whatever that they need to do. And so that's the biggest thing is that, you know, it's sometimes those are unbelievable, I should say. And so, you know, I want to remind people, I always want to tell, you know, professors like, hey, you know, we have questions because, you know, we really need to remind it, hey, I know I'm just a student, but, you know, like on the flip side, the professor was once a student too. And so, you know, it's important that we always ask questions. And even in faith too, I know there's been a lot of points throughout my like faith journey and throughout my life where I've always, you know, and even throughout my school career, you know, because that shouldn't be left out, is where, you know, I've always had the why questions. And I know like a lot of people are like, oh, you know, why is just for kids? And it's just like, not really, you know, why can be forever, why can be, you know, even when I'm old, or, you know, whether I'm bald or have gray hair or whatever, you know, the why question should last our whole entire life. Because we should always ask our teachers or professors, hey, why did this happen instead of that? You know, especially in like history or math, you know, hey, why did this like event in history happen instead of that, like instead of this case scenario? Or in math, like why was the answer 2 instead of 8,000? And, you know, and especially in our faith, in our journey of life, you know, and especially in my case, like why did this, you know, moment in my life happen? You know, why did that happen in this part of my life rather than this part of my life? And then when it comes to like the Bible stuff, you know, okay, like, you know, why did this happen instead of that happen, like that happening? Why did Jesus come at this time instead of this time? You know, and so it's always those things where, you know, we, like Albert Einstein said, kind of bring it full circle, like, you know, let us never stop asking questions, because that's where, you know, a lot of us will learn like a lot of really neat things that we would have never known before.
That is so great. And I always think that Y is important too because it's the 25th letter of the alphabet. But
yeah.
so what I'm hearing is that you know, trusting God to get us through challenges in life, especially during school, and ask questions so that we can continue sparking conversation and learning, whether it's with a teacher or with a pastor, maybe. And that's how you be a student the holy way.
Yeah, I like that.
Awesome.
I like that a lot.
So that's how you can be a student and survive school the holy way. Thank you, Jason, for helping us out.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, Holy Pastor is off to his second job, questioning all of my life choices. Until next time, keep it holy, friends.